Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once said, "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe that they are free." Recent events, not only with the current health care bill, but also on the economic front, are waking up more and more Americans to the sad truth that the federal government is out of control. A fascist state is quickly developing in America, one of the few rare places in the history of the planet where the phrase life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was not an unattainable dream, but instead a mission statement. I first fully grasped where the misguided actions and ideology of the Republicrats would lead America during the banker bailout of 2008 and returned home as soon as I could to run for United States Congress. Now, when I use the term fascism, I do not mean its typical connotation with physical brutality, murder, and torture, though this is the most easily recognizable final product. Fascism by Benito Mussolini's, the Italian dictator during World War II's originally intended economic meaning was symbolized by the fasces, which were bound sticks used as a totem for state power in ancient Rome. My definitions, which by and large agree with most of the literature, are for the following four socio-economic systems. The first is free enterprise. Free enterprise is a social system based on the private ownership of the means of production. The second is interventionism, which is a social system where the means of production is privately owned, but the government intervenes by passing regulations and orders. The third is fascism, which is just advanced interventionism. This is a social system where on paper the means of production is still privately owned, but the government has de facto control through the passing of a vast multitude of regulations and orders, accompanied usually by corruption. The fourth socioeconomic system is communism, otherwise known as honest fascism, which is a social system based on government or public ownership of the means of production. The fallacy is that today many still confuse the evils of government-sponsored corporatism, otherwise known as crony capitalism or disaster capitalism, as free enterprise, when in reality rarely do even local farmers markets pass as free enterprise today. Many examine the current state of rampant interventionism and soft fascism, concluding that the free market failed, and incorrectly decide that the solutions must be yet more centralized government control of the economy, as seen in many respects with the corporate bailouts of AIG, GM, Citibank, and others. Unfortunately, more fascism will cause a downward spiral, as can be seen and highlighted in the campaign's job plank, located on towneforcongress.com, Towne for Congress.com. Case in point is the current healthcare takeover, where a tax of almost $1 trillion will be levied upon the American people in new taxes over the several next few years to provide coverage, not necessarily actually providing health care, as I've pointed out previously. Congress, via the HMO Act of 1973 and a multitude of other acts, has created a government-sponsored insurance cartel that does not serve consumers best. A system of free enterprise would deliver the most affordable, best quality health care to consumers with the most features, while naturally regulating the upcoming medical workers shortage as the baby boomers attempt to retire. The solutions to the health care situation are to remove state mandates that dictate 15 to 40% of the premiums in Pennsylvania, destroy insurance portability barriers over state lines, pursue tort reform on the state level, enact federal tax relief legislation, remove state restrictions on licensing and seats in the medical school system, and provide a sound currency to stop price inflation. Note that all these solutions are doing is calling for less government intervention, not more. Also note that while Republican politicians may at first seem to support my line of reasoning, at heart they seek control just like the Democrats. Besides the health care tax bill, Congress has been hard at work creating new barriers for businesses on the economic front. Senator Christopher Dodd introduced legislation markedly similar to H.R. 4173, which was passed by the House, the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2009. I called this bill the automatic bailout bill in November, as the bill grants sweeping new powers to the Federal Reserve and creates more central planning, unelected bureaucrats calling this the Financial Services Oversight Council. Section 1105 of this act gives the council vast powers to take over transactions of all financial holding companies that pose a, quote, grave threat to the financial stability or economy of the United States, unquote, which is of course left undefined. Section 1701 gives the Federal Reserve, quote, in unusual and extingent circumstances that a liquidity event exists that could destabilize the financial system's power, unquote, to authorize immediate bailouts and assistance to any, quote, individual, partnership, or corporation, unquote. This enables the Federal Reserve to neatly bypass Congress when the next crisis occurs. What is the dollar limit on the Fed's new bailout authority? A cool $4 trillion. Section 1405 is a comedy. It brazenly stipulates that the FDIC Deposit Insurance Fund, which insures bank accounts, that this ratio must be higher than 1.15%. Unfortunately, the Deposit Insurance Fund is already at negative 0.4% and is completely insolvent with shortfalls of close to $21 billion. While the government is intent on printing its way to prosperity, down this route lies only madness. Fascism, communism, and even much of interventionism that violate individual liberties are just varying degrees of central planning, aka socialism. As America installed more interventions in the economy, the great Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises in 1950 delivered a lecture, Middle-of-the-Road Policy Leads to Socialism, which warned that interventionism, over the long run, would still lead to socialism. Mises was correct, and the impending dollar currency crisis that will make the current situation pale in comparison remains unheeded by the money printers in Congress and the Fed. If America is to have freedom from fascism, the current healthcare and economic takeovers must be firmly rejected. The greatest threats to America's prosperity, liberties, and way of life do not tread in forsaken deserts on the other side of the world, but instead infest the halls of Washington, D.C. The choice between the two the failed status quo or the solution that will create prosperity is stark, but easy to make once the facts are understood. America must leave this road to serfdom or pay its eventual consequences. As I pledged on the health care bill, so do I pledge on any economic takeover Congress passes to immediately act to revoke it once I take office in January 2011 as an independent private citizen, beholden not to the lobbyists and special interests, but to the people in my district whom I will faithfully serve by delivering true transparency and accountability. Again, I like to highlight the differences between the current status quo. The current status quo offers the following. The money power, the power to create money, is held by the government and the bankers. Number two, the government commands the economy. Number three, this type of economics is renowned for deficit spending and stealing via currency debasement. They also, number four, redistribute wealth to the military-industrial complex, banking cartels, special interest groups, and corporations. Number five, they allow and rationalize the government takeover of private businesses. And lastly, they may promote the word capitalism and free market in word, but indeed this functions as crony capitalism, vulture capitalism, or disaster capitalism. The second type of economics is where the people own the money power, not the government. The government does not play any role whatsoever in economic planning. This type of economics promotes honest money and balanced budgets instead of deficit spending. And it also highly rewards those who create wealth and shares it with all of society. Government does not take over the private businesses, and it promotes free market capitalism and laissez-faire, which is French for let them be economics. Thank you very much for listening, and for liberty, this is Jake Towne, independent candidate for United States Congress in Pennsylvania's 15th Congressional District. Again, feel free to visit my website, towneforcongress.com, Towne for Congress.com.